Come on, you fuckers think that just because a guy reads comics he can't start some shit? I'll fucking take all you want!
No violence. You're heavy.
Home again, home again.
You betray the law!
Class is Pain 101.
This one's for you.
I guess one person can make a difference.
Greetings, true believers. It is I, Endless Jess, here with the very first weekly Panelcast. I haven't actually decided what to call it yet. I can't decide between Panelcast or Amazing Comics Weekly. Maybe I'll use them both. Maybe, I don't know, I'll put a straw poll. Everybody vote. Everybody vote for the title of this new weekly podcast here on the Procrastinators. The motherfucking Panelcast, baby! Starring Endless Jess. I'm talking about comics, people! The most important thing in the fucking world, besides wrestling. Those are the only two things that sustain me. I am a life form powered by wrestling and comics, and that's it. The same way that Digibro is powered by, like, lollies and pajama pants, and Ben is powered by money and depression, and Nate is powered by being wrong all the time. I am powered. I take 2 AA batteries right up my ass, and those 2 batteries are labeled wrestling and comics. I don't have a weekly wrestling podcast yet, but at least we're getting there. We're halfway there, living on a prayer. We're halfway to the promised land. Who knows? Maybe someday I will have a wrestling podcast too, but at least right now, I finally have this outlet for me to spew all of my undying, unbridled devotion to superheroes and comics and all that goofy man-child bullshit. You know, if only I had some kind of man-child-centric YouTube channel. I don't know. I don't think I do. I can barely remember. I don't know. But this is the podcast-centric YouTube channel, and that's what it's all about, baby, because I am excited to be doing this. I recently posted the very first edition of my new series, Amazing Comics, on my channel, Endless Jess, and you can all go watch it right now if you haven't. It's a video about Judge Dredd and why I think that he's a cool guy, and his comics are awesome, and everyone should read them. It's just me explaining the appeal of Judge Dredd as I see it in this first episode of my new series, Amazing Comics. And in addition to that, I'm also doing this weekly podcast about comics just to ease people into it and teach people, educate people about comics. And I'm excited because this is something that I've been wanting to do for years and years and years, but everything I do takes me roughly 11 years of planning before I can actually get it off the ground and actually get it done. That's the creative process of me. Everything needs to stay in like a metapod state so that it has time to grow from a fledgling idea or a flight of fancy in my brain, a little seed in the back of my mind. It needs time to sprout and evolve into an ill Beedrill. As the great poet Me once said, I'm a cocoon, wait until I burst, to an ill Beedrill gonna kill with words. So I was thinking about this new thing I'm doing, this new avenue of making comic book videos, this dream that I've finally achieved in my life of making comic book videos. And I was thinking that, you know, in addition to the Amazing Comic series on my channel, Endless Jess, that you should all go watch right now. I'm not sure if I've said that before, but I'm saying it right now for the 300th time. You should go there right now and watch it and come back here. In addition to that, I'll also be doing this weekly podcast to educate people about comics because every comic book fan, here's the thing about comic book fans. Every comic book fan secretly wants everyone else to be a comic book fan. I don't think people realize that. I think people assume that comic book fans are going to be elitist and not want anyone in their club like how most fandoms are. But I don't think comic book fans are like that, because every time that you walk into a comic book store, I swear to God, the cashiers, they all light up like it's fucking Christmas Eve and Santa Claus just came in through the chimney to get his comics. Every comic book store in the world, when you go in there, everybody in there looks like they're happy to see you. And me especially. My greatest joy in life is sharing the things that I love. Sharing cool stuff with everyone. I'm like the end of the movie Ebenezer Scrooge of cool stuff, right? I started out as this crotchety old man, all miserly, hoarding my stuff like the dragon Smaug. I'm mixing my analogies here. I'm combining them into this grotesque, amorphous Akira blob of metaphors and analogies and references Try to keep up. I'm an Akira blob made up of Ebenezer Scrooge and also the dragon Smaug, and I'm sitting under my lonely mountain, slumbering on top of this hoard. I'm a hot mess hoarder, baby. I'm referencing myself now. I've got so many references inside me about cool stuff to spew out at people that half of my references are just me, because I'm the coolest stuff of them all. So I'm sitting on this pile of cool stuff that I've been hoarding for decades. I killed the Dwarf King. I took all of his cool stuff, and I'm just sitting there in the mountain, and nobody can have my cool stuff. It's my cool stuff. I don't know the joys of sharing yet. I'm like the guy in the Barney movie where they went to the island and the guy was living in the treehouse and he didn't want to share his cool inventions, and Barney and friends taught him about the joy of sharing. I'm also that guy, in addition to being like Smaug and also like Ebenezer Scrooge. It's all the same metaphor. It's all the same basic idea. It's the same basic thing that I'm getting at here, but it's 3 different stories, all of them at once happening, all at the same time in my brain. I'm as miserly as all 3 of those guys put together, and the lesson that I learned at the end about sharing is 10 times more heartwarming than any of their lessons, because it's all of them at once, combined into a fusion, like Dragon Ball Z, like all that, like Smaug, you know what I'm getting at, okay? So I'm that guy, and I'm the Dragon Smaug, and I'm also the guy on the island in Barney and Friends, and I'm also Ebenezer Scrooge, and then the Ghost of Christmas, then Marley shows up. Marley and Marley, they show up first, and then the ghost, you know how the story of A Christmas Carol goes, you know what happens, you get it. The point is, I learned the lesson about sharing, and I run into the streets of London on Christmas morning with a bundle of gifts in my arms, all the cool stuff, all these things that I've loved throughout my life, that have made me who I am, that have influenced me into becoming this unstoppable mass of nerd rage and pop culture knowledge that makes up the entity known as Endless Jess. I've got it all under my arms, and I'm running out into the streets of London on Christmas morning, and I'm throwing it at people. I'm throwing my cool stuff. I'm not even asking if they want it. I'm fucking chucking it at their heads. I'm taking a box of comics and I'm throwing it at some orphan's head, and it's hitting him in the temple and knocking him over, and he's bleeding on the ground and twitching and convulsing and dying. But I don't care, because he's got comics now, and that's all I care about. I don't care if you live or die. I just care that you understand and appreciate why all the stuff that I love is great and amazing. All the stuff that I love needs to be appreciated by everyone, and I will beat you over the head with it until you learn. Until you either learn or die. I will beat you over the head with a box of comics and wrestling boots and controllers and video games and sexy naked girls. All of it. It's all the stuff that I like. Hamburgers. I'm gonna beat you to death with a fucking hamburger and a hot dog until you learn to show respect, until you put respect on the name of all the stuff that I like. Anyways, let's talk about comics. I think that's enough of an intro. Okay, so here's the format of this show. Real laid back. I read comics every week, and I'm just going to go through all the comics that I read this week and kind of review them, I guess, and go over my thoughts and probably spurg out and go on a bunch of wild, impassioned rants and tangents, because when you really love something, you also really hate it. You know, I love comics just like I love wrestling, and just like with wrestling, I know how good it's supposed to be, so when it's bad, this nerd rage just boils inside me like a thermometer that's about to pop and cover the world with acid. And everybody melts and dies like that guy at the end of RoboCop. It's horrible, it's brutal, it's violent, it's grotesque, you don't want that. You don't want to see it, man. So this first episode of the podcast is actually going to be a giant-sized episode because I'm covering 2 weeks worth of comics here. I was all set to record this last week, and it took me a week. I had to do other stuff. The idea still needed 1 more week in the idea cocoon. And now it's finally ready, so I'm going to go over last week's comics and then this week's comics. So here we are for the week of Wednesday, October the 11th. I mean 12th! Okay, so the first comic that I want to talk about that I read last week is Deadpool number 20. This is a one-shot. One-shots are always cool. That means it's not a part of like an ongoing arc or a story. It's just an issue that anybody can pick up and buy. One-shots are usually fun. I always like checking them out, picking them up, buying them. Because there's no commitment, you know? Nowadays, every story is a fucking an 8-issue epic, a huge fucking universe-sprawling event with 11 core issues and 50 backup issues, and, sticking its tendrils into every other comic in the company, and if you buy one fucking comic, you have to buy the whole goddamn story, and end up spending $500. So thank God that once in a while you can at least get your hands on a nice, succinct, compact one-shot that tells a complete story in 22 pages. There's an art to that. There is an art that is being lost nowadays when it comes to brevity in comics, especially superhero comics. It's ridiculous because some of the most beloved comic book stories of all time were stories that were one-shots or two-shots, either one issue or two issues. Days of Future Past from the X-Men. This, revolutionary story that everybody remembers, that everybody looks back on fondly. It was made into a fucking movie. It's like 2 issues. It's a short fucking story. The Killing Joke, one of the most influential Batman stories ever written. It's like, 40 pages? Maybe less? One-shots are cool. Keep that shit to the point. Don't waste my fucking time and don't waste my fucking money. So this is Deadpool number 20, and it's a one-shot. And, I think right from the cover of the book, you know exactly what the story is going to be. It's, the cover of this issue is Deadpool sitting on a rooftop with a girl. Immediately just from looking at it, if you're genre savvy, if you're comic savvy, you know exactly what they're doing. This is a parody, a Deadpool version of one of the classic superhero tropes, which is the superhero having to talk a person down from suicide. I think eventually every superhero deals with this story or has to contend with this premise because it's a sort of an inherently interesting premise. You take these larger-than-life fictional superheroes who are usually punching aliens and fighting, supervillains and robots and all this fantastical stuff, all this outrageous, out-of-this-world conflict, and you put them in a very down-to-earth, realistic conflict, like having to talk someone down from suicide. And it's a premise that if the character is good, if it's a superhero that the writer understands, or is, a three-dimensional character with a very strongly defined personality, then the premise sort of writes itself. You just take character A, sit them next to suicidal nobody B, and you just let them talk. You see what happens. You see how... I talked about this on The Plebe and the Weeb. It's one of my favorite things about fiction, is just seeing the tropes. I love tropes because I love characters, and I love seeing how all of these different characters and different personalities interact with and resolve the same tropes. I think that tropes get a bad rap. I think people say, oh, this story is cliche, or... this has been done before, so, yeah, everything's been done before, but I think that, sometimes the most basic, reusable stories are the ones that you can get the most mileage out of if you're a skilled writer, or if you have a really strong character at the center of them. So this is that for Deadpool, and, it's obviously, any comic that does this trope is more or less directly pulling from Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman, which is probably the most famous example of this in comics. It's that famous... It's just like one page out of the comic where Superman is dying. He's got, poison. He's got kryptonite poisoning, and he's on his last legs, but he's still going around the world, solving crimes and doing good deeds and helping people out. And it's just one page where he zooms up behind this girl, this young teenage gothy-looking girl who's about to jump off a building and kill herself. And he just fucking Supermans his way right up behind her, and he says this perfect, brilliant little quote. Let me see if I remember it correctly. I believe it was, "Your doctor really did get held up, Reagan. It's never as bad as it seems." Which is such a fucking perfect quote, because it's just vague enough. It, implies this whole story that you as the reader don't know about, but you don't necessarily have to know about. In 2 sentences, Grant Morrison gives this character that we've never seen before an entire history and an entire personality that you can sort of fill in for yourself as the reader, just based on what Superman says in like 2 sentences. And it's so effective, and it makes you feel for the girl, and it builds up Superman as like this amazing guy who just knows everything, and he's always listening, and he's always there for you. And you just read those fucking lines, and you just look at that panel, that one page, with no other context behind it except for what's on the page. And you read it, and you just fucking instantly tear up every time. It's the most touching thing in the world. And like, even though it's part of an entire graphic novel, of like an entire 12-issue story, all of that is almost totally superfluous, because right in the middle of it, in the span of all of like 2 or 3 panels, he tells the ultimate Superman story, the greatest, most important Superman story ever told, that you ever need. Pretty much the only Superman story that you ever need is told in those 2 or 3 panels in the middle of the book, of just Superman. He's flying around the fucking world helping people, and he sees a girl about to jump off a fucking building, and he gets behind her, and he says some stuff, and he comforts her, and he fucking saves her. Not even with his superpowers, not with super strength, not with like, no X-ray vision or super speed, with super compassion, motherfucker. That's Superman's real power. That's why Superman fucking rules. And it's the most amazing thing. It's the most amazing thing in the world. You read it, it makes you cry every time. It's a fucking tearjerker for sure. And that's probably the most famous example of this particular trope. So of course, the whole hook of this book right here, Deadpool number 20, the whole hook of it, sort of the satire or parody element of it, is, let's take that incredibly touching Superman story. Let's take that trope that was so famously, incredibly touching in Superman, and let's apply it to cynical, apathetic, crass, and stupid Deadpool. It's a perfect recipe for instant comedy. Like I said, it writes itself. You take a trope that works for one character, and you see how it works with a completely different character. That's the magic of tropes, and that's why I love them. So you see this book, you walk into the comic book store, and you see a book, and it's a Deadpool comic, and it's the cover of the comic is a girl, standing on a rooftop with Deadpool sitting beside her. And you take one look at the cover of the comic, and you instantly know what kind of story it is. You know what they're doing, and you're instantly hooked, because yes, of course I want to see how this trope applies to Deadpool. Deadpool, the wisecracking, cynical jerk-ass, the merc with the mouth, the regenerating degenerate, this ugly, perverted bastard with a heart of gold. Who wouldn't want to read that? Nobody, that's who. Nobody wouldn't want to read that. And so now you've heard me gush about the premise for 10 minutes. You probably want to know what I actually thought of the comic. How well did it deliver on that premise? Was I entertained by the final product as much as I am entertained by the premise inherently? The answer is yes. This is a good-ass comic. It was funny, and it felt true to the character of Deadpool, and it even succeeded in being a little bit heartwarming. It starts out, the girl's on the building, she's about to kill herself. Deadpool comes up, he says, "No, don't do it." And, she immediately says, "Shut up. Don't try to talk me down. Don't pretend like you care." And immediately Deadpool, being Deadpool, just totally throws her off guard by saying, like, "Hey, lady, don't put words in my mouth. I didn't say I care. I'm trying to care, but you're making it difficult." So that catches her off guard, and they start having a conversation and a little bit of a back and forth. Deadpool's trying to talk her down, but he doesn't really know how to do it exactly, because he's not that kind of superhero. Deadpool is not the guy who inspires people. Deadpool's the guy who kills people and makes dumb jokes about Mexican food. So that's what he's doing. He's making dumb jokes about Mexican food. He's sort of awkwardly trying and failing to talk her down from suicide. His dumb jokes aren't really impressing her, so finally he says, "You know what, fine. Why don't you just hang out with me for the night, and we'll go have some fun. And if you still feel like jumping off a building at the end of the night, then I'll let you jump off a building, but Parker Industries is down the road that way, jump off of somebody else's building. Don't jump off of my building because I don't need the bad publicity. So she says fine, and they're going around the city and they're doing stuff. And basically Deadpool is taking her on his wacky mercenary errands. So he's breaking into like drug lords' apartments and hoodlums and beating people up and shooting people and killing bad guys and all that. And she's sort of tagging along and sort of being his sidekick for the night. And the whole time he's cracking jokes and he's playing on his phone like he doesn't give a shit and all that stuff. Then at the end of the comic, she says like, oh, that was fun and all, but you didn't change my mind. I still am depressed and I still kind of want to kill myself. Maybe I'm not totally sure that I want to kill myself, but you didn't exactly cure my depression, buddy. And Deadpool's like, shut up, baby. I know it. That's why I'm taking you here. And Deadpool takes her to the fucking hospital. And it turns out that the entire comic, when he was playing on his phone, what he was actually doing was texting the hospital and letting them know that he's bringing in a suicidal person later that night. So they're ready for her. And he has this speech at the end. Of course, I'm paraphrasing because I read it a week ago. But, so I don't remember the exact quote, but, he has this little speech to her at the end where he's like, I try to be a good superhero, but we both know that I'm not the kind of guy who can help you with this problem. So I decided to take you to people who can help you with this problem. And she goes off, and then Deadpool, he goes out of the hospital. He's feeling a little bit better about himself, and then he steps in a pile of poop, and that's how the issue ends, on a cute little joke of Deadpool stepping in poop. So it was a very in-character and very clever way to handle this premise, where Deadpool has this self-awareness, and he understands that this is not where his strength lies. His strength lies in cutting people's heads off and stuff. He has a great quote in this where he's like, where he sort of sighs to himself as he's watching her get taken away by the hospital staff, and he sighs and he goes, "Unkilling someone is way harder than what I usually do." Oh, that Deadpool. And so yeah, you have a character acknowledging his weaknesses and his flaws, and finding a clever way to solve a problem that he did not expect to have to deal with by working around those flaws. It's a great little character moment for Deadpool of just acknowledging his weakness as a superhero and making an effort to resolve the problem the way a non-superhero would resolve the problem. It was very down to earth, and it really is like a special... It says a lot about Deadpool in the same way that the Superman story that it's parodying says a lot about Superman. And that's why I love tropes, because how these different characters react to the same problems is a great device for exploring those characters. So that's Deadpool number 20. I highly recommend it. Everybody should go out and buy it and read it or whatever. I know I spoiled the entire comic, but fuck it. I don't think a spoiler like that is going to hinder your enjoyment of the comic if you pick it up. If you're in the comments pissing and moaning about spoilers, shut the fuck up. Go fucking cry me a river somewhere else. Go sit in the fucking corner with a dunce hat and eat your own shit like the diaper-wearing baby you are. I ain't got time for that shit. I ain't got time for people, for any spoiler crybabies in the comment section. Look, people, I will use my own discretion on this podcast when it comes to what I think is a harmful spoiler and what I think is a negligible spoiler, because there is a difference, okay? There are some things that are technically spoilers of what happens in the story, but they will not affect your enjoyment of the story in any negative way. Obviously, if there's a comic that hinges on some huge reveal that's supposed to be a big surprise, then that would be a spoiler that I'm not going to spoil. But I don't want to hear any fucking people crying that I spoiled this fucking one-shot Deadpool comic that you ain't never even heard of before this podcast anyways. God damn it. You weren't going to buy it anyways, but now you are going to buy it because I'm telling you that it's fucking great. And you can suck my dick. Okay, that's that. The next comic that I picked up last week was Gwenpool. We're going from Deadpool to Gwenpool. The Unbelievable Gwenpool number 7. Gwenpool is a new character. She was created late last year. She's been a little bit divisive. Some people see her as just a unoriginal premise and a corporate marketing gimmick, and They don't like her. But those people are stupid, because even a corporate marketing gimmick can have heart, damn it. Even an unoriginal idea can lead to good storytelling, you dummies, you dumb, stupid idiots. So if you don't know who Gwenpool is, she is a normal teenage girl from our world who loves comic books and has found herself in the Marvel Universe and is using her comic book savviness and genre savviness to navigate the fictional universe of Marvel Comics. So, a very tropey story. Once again, you've seen this a million times before. It's one of the oldest, most overdone premises there is. You know, audience insert character from our world gets zapped into the fictional world, and their only power is that they've got nerd knowledge and they're genre savvy about what's going on. And a lot of people see that kind of overdone, sort of hacky premise, and they just kind of write it off based on that. I just reviewed an anime called ReZero on the Plebe and the Weeb over on Digibros channel, where we both shit on that show pretty relentlessly for having the same hacky, tired premise. But the difference was that show wasn't well written. It didn't do anything interesting with that overdone premise. That's why we didn't like it. Like I said, I'm 100% in favor of tropes. I love them, and any trope, any premise, no matter how hacky, can be entertaining and worth reading if it's expounded upon in a captivating manner, if it's written well. And is Gwenpool written well so far? You better believe it, baby. This series does do interesting things with the premise. It utilizes it in creative and clever ways. Like, for example, her name, right off the bat, is a clever little in-joke. The joke is that being genre savvy and being knowledgeable about comics, the first thing she does upon getting zapped into the comic book world is she fashions herself a little Deadpool knockoff costume, and she starts calling herself Gwenpool, because she figures that the only way to survive in the Marvel Universe is to become someone important, so that people will want to read her adventures. So if she names herself after the two most eye-catching names in the Marvel Universe, Gwen Stacy and Deadpool, and combines them into a portmanteau of Gwenpool, then people will be interested and they will buy her comic and she will survive and be a successful character in this universe. So the name Gwenpool is a totally shameless marketing ploy, but they make it a part of the narrative where she picked that name to be a shameless marketing ploy as a means of interacting and surviving the Marvel Universe. You know, people see the comic and they go, who the fuck is this, Gwenpool? What, did they bring back Gwen Stacy and they made her a Deadpool clone now? What the fuck is this shit? That's so goddamn stupid, I have to read it. I have to buy it. And then they buy it and they read it and they go, oh, it's not what I thought it was. It's actually a clever little twist. She named herself that on purpose to get me to buy it. She rused me. It was a clever ruse and it worked, and now that I'm reading the book, I see that it's clever and entertaining and interesting, and I'm going to keep reading it. It's brilliant. It's genius. I like it. And there's all kinds of little things like that throughout the series. These little clever utilizations of the premise. Like, for example, in this issue starts with there's these, like, octopus aliens coming down and shooting up the place and wrecking up New York, and you know, it's an alien invasion, and Gwenpool is able to fool them by putting her costume on a little pig and sending it off into the city, and they mistake the pig for her because they don't know what humans look like. They can't tell humans apart from pigs because they're stupid aliens. And somebody asks her, how did you know that ridiculous cockamamie plan would work? And Gwen's answer is, I have never seen those particular aliens before in a Marvel comic. Therefore, I knew that they were created specifically for me to deal with. Therefore, I knew that my cockamamie asinine plan would work. So unlike a lot of shows, like ReZero, for example, which utterly fail to deliver on this genre-savvy protagonist promise of a premise, Gwenpool actually does consistently deliver on that premise. And it's even a little bit feelsy at times. It does manage to have a little bit of pathos at certain points. Because Gwenpool, of course, she comes to this universe and she's very arrogant and thinks she knows all the answers, and thinks it's going to be a walk in the park, thinks it's going to be all fun and games. And because of that, she screws up a little bit. She makes some mistakes. She gets a friend of hers killed at the beginning and is very sad. And she slowly realizes that while she may be zapped into a fictional universe, while she's there, for her, it's real. So there are consequences to her idiotic actions. And there are some moments where she makes mistakes and has to become sad. It's good. She's a good character. This character could have easily been one-dimensional and stupid and utterly worthless, but they've succeeded in making her likable and three-dimensional. There was one issue where she teamed up with Spider-Man, not the real Spider-Man. I'm talking fucking Kmart brand Miles Morales Spider-Man. Don't get me started on that shit. But she's teaming up with Spider-Man, and they're trying to catch this, would-be school shooter. And of course, Gwen doesn't take it seriously, and she's talking all this, fourth wall-breaking, genre-savvy comic book trash, and it's all going totally over Spidey's head. And she tries to kill this kid. She flat out just tries to kill him because fuck it, she's in a fictional world. She can kill people, who cares? They don't matter, they're not real, right? So of course Spider-Man freaks out. He's like, what are you doing? You can't kill people. And she starts talking all this shit, no, you don't understand. I remember this guy from the Ultimate Comics. They brought him back to the mainline Marvel Universe. The only reason that they would bring him back is because somebody remembered him. He was created just for you. He doesn't matter. He's not a real person. He's not even an important villain. He's just some random dropped plot line from an old comic book series that somebody remembered and decided to bring back to finish off here. He's not important. He's not even real. I can just kill him. And of course, Miles Morales freaks out and fucking punches her in the face and ties her up and says, holy shit, you're a crazy person, you can't go around killing people. And she's all sad because she likes the superheroes, but the superheroes don't like her because she's basically a fucking maniac, because she has a hard time accepting that anything around her is real. It's all fictional, and she's just kind of amoral because of it, and she's basically just Subaru, but done right. I mean, all of you little anime faggots out there, you turds who pissed and moaned that me and Digi didn't give a high enough score to fucking ReZero. Well, this is why, because ReZero didn't deliver on its premise in any interesting ways, whereas you have a series like Gwenpool, over here in My American Comics, a superior medium. You have a series like Gwenpool, which is the exact same premise, but done right, done correctly, done interestingly and entertainingly, and they actually succeed in making a likable, decent protagonist who is arrogant because of her genre savviness and does make mistakes, but actually learns from them and still manages to be somewhat relatable and fun to read about, despite those flaws. So, Gwenpool number 7, highly recommended. The entire Gwenpool line so far, I say, is highly recommended. I think everybody should be reading Gwenpool. It's a really good comic. And ReZero gets a 0 out of 10. Fuck you all. You're all a bunch of stupid whiny babies. You don't know shit about fuck. I hate weeaboos. I don't respect you. Go to hell and die. Next up, we have My Little Pony Friends Forever, number 32. So, the My Little Pony Friends Forever comic series is a spin-off of the regular My Little Pony Friendship is Magic comic series, which itself is a spin-off of the My Little Pony Friendship is Magic TV series, which itself is the 4th iteration of the My Little Pony children's cartoon franchise. So it's like, Turtles all the way down. It's just My Little Pony all the way back, stretching through history to the dawn of man. When the first Neanderthal stepped out of his cave and was brutally murdered by the first Homo sapien, ushering in the age of man. The Homo sapien, he bashed in the Neanderthal's skull with a rock, and he stood over his bloodied corpse, and he beat his chest, and he howled into the sky a mighty cry, a mighty roar that sounded like this. So the premise of the Friendship Forever series is basically just taking two characters who normally don't get to interact with each other as much, and pairing them up for little adventures. Again, another trope that I love. Futurama did this a lot, especially in like the first Comedy Central season when it first came back. They had a lot of episodes that were this premise of teaming up Bender and Amy, or Bender and Hermes, you know, or the Professor and Zoidberg, and going into their history together. You can get a lot of interesting stories that way by just pairing up characters who don't normally pair up together and seeing how they interact. You can get a lot of clever little stories out of a premise like that, and you can get a lot of clever little character moments out of a premise like that. So it's always interesting to see. And this one, issue number 32 of Friends Forever, struck me as particularly interesting, so I had to buy it. The cover leapt right at me, right off the shelf. I immediately took one look at it and said, well, I gotta read this. It's Fluttershy and Daring Do on an adventure together. You gotta see the cover for this. It's beautiful. They're flying through like an exploding, like the inside of a volcano, it looks like, or some cave with lava. It's cool. She's got like it's awesome. It's dynamic and it's pretty and it's beautiful and it's cute and it's a character team up that you never see. So I had to get it, had to check it out, I had to read it to see for myself if it was as cool as it looked. And let me tell you, people, it was exactly as cool as it looked. I'm not going to say that it totally blew me away, but it certainly didn't disappoint me either. It's pretty much, it's a My Little Pony comic. If you like My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic the Show, if you're a brony kind of person, or if you're into it, if you like My Little Pony, then you know exactly what you're getting when you pick this up. It's very funny. It's well written. Just the first page is sort of instantly sets the tone. It's Fluttershy. She's in her cottage, and she's going over her calendar, and she's all excited. She's like, oh boy, I finally have a whole week off with no adventures. I don't have to save Equestria this week. No, annoying, stupid bullshit. I'm just going to take it easy and have a nice, relaxing, adventure-free weekend. And then Daring Do just bursts in through the door, and she's like, we got to go on an adventure. Rainbow Dash told me that you're good with animals. Let's go fucking fight animals, or save animals. We're going to the jungle. Let's go fucking, yeah. And she sort of looks at the camera and she winks and she goes, not again. And the studio audience goes, ha, 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 ha. Yeah, woo, woo, yes, yeah! Great stuff, classic. Can't wait to see how this adventure is going to pan out. So they go on this adventure, and so the main gist of this adventure is that there's this species of spider that has like a map on its back. It's got markings on its little spidery abdomen in the shape of a map. And if you find all the spiders together, then their little butts will combine to form a map to some treasure or some shit. And Daring Do needs Fluttershy's help because Fluttershy is an animal expert who loves little spiders. And this was a very cute little touch, a very enjoyable little detail, because the reason that she needs her in particular is because Daring Do is afraid of spiders the same way that Indiana Jones is afraid of snakes. So that was clever. That was nice. I like that. And so they go and they have a funny little cute adventure. Huizodl is there. He still sucks. He's still a really shitty character design. Why is his face on the end of his nose? I hate that. It's terrible. He's the worst guy. I think Daring Do needs a new villain, seriously, because that guy sucks. But anyways, they fight him. There's spiders, and there's, it's Fluttershy. It's cute. It's funny. It's My Little Pony. What is there to say? It's just a nice, cute, fun little adventure. Yeah, cute and fun, just like the show, before fucking season 6 came and ruined it. Season 6 isn't that bad. It's pretty bad, though. Hey! We're not talking about that. That's the past. You gotta put your behind in your past. You gotta look forward to the future. I'm a comics boy now, not a horse boy.
I'm still a horse boy.
Get out of here! Nobody wants you! Go! Go back to the furnace room! Get out! Okay. Sorry for that little, spat roommates quarrel that you all had to witness. Fucking Colt Corona. He's still a horse boy. I mean, I can't blame him. He's literally a horse boy. Anyways, on to my comic of the week for last week. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, number 63. So right off the bat, I gotta talk about just this whole modern Turtles series in general. It's been going on now for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years. I mean, it's on 63, so do the math yourself. How many months is that? 63 months is a couple years. It's been going strong. It's been very consistently high quality from the first issue, pretty much. It's been a great series. I've been shouting its merits from the rooftops for a while. It's probably altogether my favorite incarnation of the Turtles. Definitely up there, because the Turtles have had so many different incarnations and reimaginings over the years. It's a franchise that just it never dies. It's always evolving to fit its era. The original comics in the 80s were sort of a satire of like gritty, dark 80s comics like Daredevil and Dark Knight Returns, so they were very dark. And then from there, the cartoon series that came out in the late 80s and early 90s was, very lighthearted and cartoony. It was a show for kids, and it was marketing all the toys and stuff. And then the movies that came out, the movie was sort of a nice middle ground between the serious comics and the cartoon. And it was pretty good. The movies are, and then there was more. There was a live action TV series. There was a second cartoon series in the early mid 2000s. There was a whole new terrible Michael Bay movie franchise. Out of the Shadows wasn't that bad. It was okay. Bebop and Rocksteady were pretty great, but the Turtles just keeps on surviving because it keeps on changing and adapting, and it's always different. And what I love about this current incarnation from IDW is that these comics have achieved this fantastic balance of every incarnation of the Turtles ever. They've taken elements from the original comics and from the cartoons and the movies and the 2000s cartoon and all of these different elements from all of these different incarnations of the Turtles, and they've blended them together into this cohesive continuity and this cohesive narrative that is like perfect. It's just it's the perfect Turtles saga. A turtle stew, if you will. They've done a fantastic job and I love it. So issue number 63, which is my comic of the week. This is setting up a very interesting story with the Turtles that I have not seen done before. A little backstory going into this issue. Shredder is dead. They've defeated Shredder, they've defeated the Foot Clan, and in the aftermath of defeating Shredder, Master Splinter has become the new head of the Foot Clan. So this clan of ninjas who were their enemies, now Splinter is in charge of all of them, and he's, trying to make them a force for good in the world, and having to deal with the responsibility of leading this massive army of ninjas. And in this issue in particular, it gets really interesting because Donatello has this scientist friend named Harold, and Harold gets kidnapped by this gang called the Street Phantoms, who are like a rival gang to the Foot Clan. And they go to Master Splinter about it, and Master Splinter goes, yes, all according to plan. I used Harold as bait so that the Street Phantoms would kidnap him and reveal their location so that the Foot may strike. And so of course the Turtles are like, hey, wait a minute, that's kind of fucked up. You used our friend as bait? And Master Splinter is like assuring them, I knew that they wouldn't hurt him. He's too valuable, his scientific mind, they needed him. I knew that he would be okay. Trust me, this was all for the greater good. I knew what I was doing. But it's like what's going on here? Is Master Splinter being corrupted or compromised by his new position? And that's so fucking cool and interesting. I've been a fan of the Turtles forever. I've never seen them tackle this story before. I've never seen them come at it from this angle before, where suddenly Master Splinter is in charge of the fucking Foot Clan, and he's trying to make them good guys, but you have to wonder if he's changing the Foot Clan or if the Foot Clan is changing him. You have to wonder if Master Splinter really knows what he's doing or if he's slowly being corrupted by his new job. This is so fucking cool. Oh God, it's so awesome. Like, how often do we see, like, any character development for Master Splinter at all, right? Like, how often does he even factor in as a character? He's usually just, like, the wise mentor. But these fucking comics have been so good. Like, every character in this series gets fleshed out and has arcs and changes to their personality. Every character matters. Everything in this series, oh God, it's so good. It's so fucking good. Oh God. So yeah, and there's a part where Leonardo is talking to Master Splinter. He says, look, the other guys are concerned. You know, Leonardo is basically confronting him about these concerns. And Master Splinter has this talk with Leonardo, and it's so fucking well written, where Master Splinter is justifying his actions to Leonardo, and he's kind of right. Like, it makes Leonardo step back and wonder, like, maybe I was wrong to confront Master Splinter, even though, like, his gut feeling is telling him that Master Splinter is making a mistake. And you, the reader, your gut feeling is that Master Splinter is being corrupted, but at the same time, he's kind of swaying you. You're like, you know, that does kind of make sense, because Master Splinter is, he's bringing up a scenario from, like, a little while ago when the Turtles went over his head and didn't involve him in the full extent of their plans and kept him in the dark because they had a plan to sort of, like, you know, rekajigger the Technodrome without his knowing of it, and he would have disapproved, so they went over his head and didn't tell him their full plan. And he's bringing that up, and he's like, you know, Leonardo, my son, at the time, you left me out of your plans, and you kept me in the dark because you thought I would have disapproved. And you were right. I would have disapproved at the time, but only because I didn't know what you knew, and I would have been wrong. So you were right to go over my head. And so now I need you and your brothers to trust me that I know things that you don't, and trust me when I'm leaving you in the dark about the full extent of my plans, and trust that I'm doing the right thing. And it's like, you know that using the guy as bait was a pretty shitty thing to do, but you can't really argue with Master Splinter's logic there. He's totally right. So Leonardo just kind of shuffles off to his brothers, kind of defeated, like, you know, I talked to Master Splinter, I don't know, he kind of has a point, I guess, and you're reading it, and you're like, yeah, I guess, I fucking shit. So it's so good. It's presenting this conflict that is so interesting, and it's presenting it well. You know, you could have easily done this badly and had it fall flat and just come off as try hard and shitty, but they didn't. It's really well written, and it's really great. And so the Turtles are going to attack the Street Phantoms, right? They're going to rescue their friend Harold. And while this is all happening, it's also cutting to Harold, the scientist, tied up to a chair being interrogated by the Street Phantom guy. And Harold's a great character, too. He's like this sardonic, cynical, rude, sort of Dr. House type character. Like, he knows he's a genius and he doesn't have to put up with any shit. He's just some weak guy in a lab coat. He can't defend himself, but he's tied to a chair being interrogated, and he's just being a huge dick. He's just not cooperating. He's like, shut up. You can't threaten me. I'm fucking smarter than you. My fucking turtle friends are gonna come over here and kick your ass. It's great. All the scenes of Harold being interrogated are great. And so then it's the Turtles, and they're going to, you know, they're going to break in there and rescue Harold, and all of a sudden they're surrounded by Street Phantoms. They're surrounded by all these bad guys, and, you know, Master Splinter's there. He's got a couple, like, Foot Clan ninjas as backup, so it's, you know, it's the Turtles and Master Splinter and a bunch of Foot Clan ninjas, like, together as a team, and they're surrounded. They're still outnumbered by these Street Phantoms. There's too many of them, and they're like, oh God, Master Splinter, we're surrounded. What do? You gotta tell the Foot Ninjas to attack. You gotta give them the go to charge forward. And Master Splinter's like, not yet. Wait a minute. We don't need to. And then it reveals. It looks up. The fucking cavalry arrives. And who is it? Motherfucking Casey Jones. the last page, Casey Jones comes to back up the Turtles, but it's not just Casey Jones. Oh no. It's Casey Jones and the Purple Dragons. In this continuity, the Purple Dragons are like another street gang that like Casey Jones' father was in control of, and they used to be bad guys or whatever, and Casey Jones has been gone for a while, but Casey Jones shows up, and he's got the fucking Purple Dragons behind him, like he's taken control of them. So it's Casey Jones, and it's a whole army of dudes in hockey masks with Purple Dragons painted on the hockey masks, and so Casey Jones has created his own Casey Jones Purple Dragon Street Gang army of a bunch of dudes in hockey masks, and they're gonna have a huge fucking ninja brawl, and it's gonna be the coolest thing ever, and I can't wait, and that is my comic of the week. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, number 63, it's fucking cool. It's written by Kevin Eastman, the original creator of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He's still doing it, he's still making comics, and he's making the best comics, the best iteration of the Turtles that's ever been made. So the original creator is, you know, still writing for this series, and he's still knocking it out of the park. It's fucking awesome. Everybody should read it. Everybody should be reading the new Turtles comics. Everybody in the world. They're fucking awesome. Okay, let's see. What came out this week now? I talked about the comics from last week. What came out this week? I don't really remember what the hell came out this week. Bunch of bullshit, probably. A bunch of stupid bullshit. I don't care about any of it. Fuck it. Who cares? This has gone on long enough. And that does it for last week's episode of this podcast, this comics. That's it. I'll see you next week, if I remember to do this again. Goodbye.